Overtime!
Welcome back to Overtime Arcade. I'm Charlie, and you're watching part 7 of our Joust restoration series. Now, by the end of this episode, my goal is to have Joust running on an arcade monitor, and in order to get there, we're going to need a working board set. So here's the assortment of Joust boards that I've assembled for this task. Keen eyes will notice that there's actually a bit more than 2 complete Joust board sets here. And we're going to need to pick the best boards here, get them all working, put them together, and then test them out. So over the last couple of months, I've been collecting Joust boards from a variety of different sources in a variety of different conditions. And the reason I got more than one complete set here is I'm going to need a second one for the Robotron that's coming later in the restoration queue. And I've already got a Robotron, and I've got, so I've got multiple Williams games, and it's always good to have backups. And this generation of Williams arcade machine, most notably Robotron and Joust, really kind of share the same board set, except, they have different ROMs, obviously. So I've talked about this before, but this generation of Williams game really is a 5 PCB set. There are 5 boards in the PCB set. You have the main board here, also referred to as the CPU board or the MPU board. You have a ROM board that has the chips that have the code to make the game run. Obviously, Joust ROMs are different than Robotron ROMs. You have this interface board, also called a widget board. This kind of controls the controls of the game, the inputs for the game. You also have a sound board. This, obviously produces the music and sounds for the game. And you've got a power supply board, which actually connects to a heatsink with a couple of transistors on it, and this, produces the correct voltages that the game needs, the plus 5 volts, negative 5 volts, and 12 volts. And so the MPU, the ROM board, and the widget board get mounted on this large metal plate, and this gets mounted on the inside of the lower coin door, and then the soundboard and the power supply board and the heatsink are mounted on this slightly smaller metal plate that's mounted on the left side of the inside of the cabinet itself. And so I've got these boards here. Like I said, I got these from different places, some from the sellers in the Claw forums, some from eBay. And right now what I want to do is sort of figure out which ones I want to use for this project. So we've got to pick out the 5 boards, and I'll put this on the tripod, the 5 boards that we're going to use in this Joust. So let's take a look at what we're dealing with here. So starting with the power, I've got a couple different options. You can see I've actually got 3 heat sinks, 2 power supply boards, and 2 of these metal plates. So I got one of these as part of an almost full set of untested boards from Game Galaxy Arcade in Tennessee, which I've actually done a video tour of, a short video tour. I've bought quite a few different things from Game Galaxy, I think over the years. Never had a problem with anything, but I'm usually buying stuff that I know is broken or know is untested. And these were untested, but they are Joust boards. They've got tags on them, that sort of thing. I did, however, end up going with deciding already to use this power supply board and this heatsink. I showed this in the previous video where we replaced the headers and we redid the connector housing between the heatsink and the power supply board. And this is the one that we're going to go with. We know that it's at least partially working. We tested it out. We got the lights. We got good voltages. So this is what we're going to work from for the power supply part of the equation. And this metal plate actually came. This was still in the Joust machine when I got it. And I got a great deal on this from Claw user Steve23. He was selling a whole bunch of PCBs and other stuff. And I bought I think an untested Atari Kangaroo PCB. And I got this for not including the metal plate, but the untested power supply board and heatsink for $10, which is an amazing deal. So Steve, thank you for that. So we're gonna work with this. I do need to replace the other headers on the power PCB. I'm going to replace the caps. We're going to do a cap kit, and I'm going to replace some of the parts that you get in a rebuild kit, including the bridge rectifier. So we'll save this stuff for later, for the future, possibly, probably for the Robotron that I'm eventually going to get to. So we should probably figure out and I'll move this a little bit closer. We should figure out the, I guess, soundboard next, right? We've actually got 3 options for the soundboard. We've got the set that came with the untested board set from Game Galaxy. That's a decent option. This is one I bought on eBay, I think a year or 2 ago, which was listed as working, but turns out it wasn't, or at least it wasn't working when I tested it in my Robotron. It looks like it's got a custom burnt Robotron sound chip, and it's got the connector, the ribbon cable connector for the sound for the speech board. So some games, including some pinball games, and obviously Williams was a manufacturer of pinball machines, and some pinball machines had speech. I think Gorgar and others, and even some of their arcade video games like Sinistar had speech, and there was an additional board that produced the speech for those games, and they had a sort of unpopulated connector on the board when it wasn't using a speech board. It didn't have to connect to a speech board. That sort of connector, like you can see here, was unpopulated. But on games where it was intended to have a speech board, there is this ribbon cable connector, which is populated here. So obviously, even though it's the same it's the same soundboard, which is a 8224. It is the same soundboard. It's got this additional ribbon connector headers for that speech board. And so this wasn't what was originally in a Joust or a Robotron for that matter. So I'll hold on to this and maybe we'll rebuild this eventually, but I don't want to use this one. Looking between the two here, the one that I got right here, which actually came from a set from Rick Shive, and Rick, I believe, was the original creator and organizer of VAPS, which is the Vintage Arcade Preservation Society. It's associated with CLOV, it's associated with the Arcade Museum, arcademuseum.com, and it's what VAPS is best known for is you go and you create an account and you sort of can track your collection, and there's like a large census, and you can see how many games of whatever are owned by collectors. And there are lots of great information. I use VAPS quite a bit. Rick, I believe, was the original organizer, and I guess he's been liquidating some of his collection. He was selling stuff on eBay and got a great deal on this. He was selling these 4 boards, 4 parts of the 5-part board set. The only thing that wasn't included in this transaction, this eBay listing, was the power supply PCB. But it was sold as, he was very, very truthful and marked it as non-working. He did have images of the game actually booting and Joust actually working, but he was very clear that it was working inconsistently. He thinks it probably was something to do with maybe the RAM sockets on the MPU. But this soundboard is beautiful, super clean. Doesn't look like it's really been worked on. It's got a lot of the original, stickers and whatnot. So I think this is the one that we'll probably work with. The only 2 things I'm noticing are, one, this crystal looks a little bit dented. I'm not sure what's up with that. So if there's an issue, that's something I'll suspect. And the little 2-position, if you can see this, the little 2-position dip switch is sort of broken off of the board. But don't worry, I've bought a replacement, so we'll be able to do that. And yeah, this is just a beautiful, clean-looking board. So I think this is the one that we'll probably want to work with. And this has a relatively late serial number here. It's in the 60 sort of prefix. Tells me, assuming these serial numbers are meaningful as sequential, which you can't always assume with Williams, that this is probably a later version of this board. So that's good. The one here from Game Galaxy isn't bad. The reset switch is sort of broken. It should sort of be a momentary switch that pops back out, and I think the spring is broken inside. But this will be maybe a good one to use for Robotron down the line. So yeah, I think this is the soundboard that we'll use. And then moving along down here, looking at the MPU or the CPU board, you can kind of think of this as the main board, the brains of the computer. There were a bunch of different revisions from Stargate to Robotron to Joust and beyond, mostly compatible with some sort of issues. Some of them had mods, that sort of thing. A couple things to look out for. These had AA batteries originally on the board to, keep the game settings and save the high scores, and those batteries would have a tendency to leak and cause battery acid damage on the board that would eat up traces and have problems. These don't look too bad. This one down here, and this, again, came from another eBay seller. I think it might have been the same one that sold me this this quote-unquote working soundboard and the rebuilt heatsink that doesn't particularly look rebuilt. But anyway, if you get a good deal, what can you complain about? So this one was sold having a RAM error. I saw it was having RAM error 12 on the screen, which could be multiple things. A couple of things I noticed with this. So this is a Rev B, and you can see that right there. There's a sort of a part number, and then under this sort of sticker, it ends with Rev B. Looks to be pretty clean and pretty good shape. It's had some work done. There's sort of an assortment of different RAMs here. Sort of this section of chips here is all RAM, like the memory. I see 4264s. I see 4164s. So these are not the original RAM chips. And the original RAM chip was a 4116, which is on the other MPU. So these are different, a different type of RAM, basically compatible, but use different voltages. And so there is a sort of adapter plugged into this board here at the power header. And you can see that this says, let's see if we can get it to focus, CPU connector from, this is like an adapter from Arcade Shop that basically, sort of changed the sort of power input to the board to be compatible with the 4164 RAM here. So that's probably fine. I tend to prefer things to be as original as possible, but I'm not worried about that. Another thing I noticed here is that this has a sort of aftermarket decoder chip here. This is what an original one looks like. There's usually two, like there is on the other one. So this is must be some sort of modern replacement. And there's the sort of typical factory mods you see. Williams kept messing with this board and kind of redesigning it and getting ahead of themselves. But it looks pretty clean. It's a little bit dirty over here, but really in not bad shape at all. But if I look at the one that I got from Rick Shive, if you can see this, let's take a look. We notice that this is a Rev C, if that's showing up, Rev C. And I believe Revision C is what came with Joust. Revision B came with Robotron. I think Robotron, sort of throughout the years being in production, shipped with, B, C, maybe D. I believe Joust was really shipped with Revision C, which is what this is. We've got the original chips here. These are the original RAM chips. Like Rick, who I believe knows what he's talking about, he has suspected that the intermittent issues he was having potentially were related to maybe the sockets needing, the RAM sockets, needing to be replaced. I see some nonsense going on down here. I'm a little bit suspicious that this might be sort of battery acid related. I'm not sure. It doesn't look too bad though. We don't see a lot of the mask or traces being eaten up. So relatively speaking, this looks okay. We have the header pins for the ribbon cables that connect the ROM board and the interface board. Those look okay, not too bent up. The sort of reset switch down here looks okay. So all in all, the top of the board looks good. And if we look at the bottom, there are a couple things that I've noticed. If you can see right here, if the camera will focus, we've got some of the solder mask scratched off and exposed the bare trace. So it looks like there might have been some work here. I don't know really what was going on, but this will be an area we keep an eye on. This chip looks like it's been replaced before. This solder doesn't look factory. The header pins have been reflowed and they don't look particularly well done. We're going to be replacing the header pins on this anyway, so we'll make sure that's in good shape. But and we've got some more exposed copper right there from the trace, getting the solder mask removed. So a couple things to keep an eye on, but nothing that really is spooking me. So yeah, I think we're going to use this MPU board for the Joust, again, because it's a Rev C, it looks like it's in good condition, and it's been, the sort of one that's I've seen working better than this one, so we'll do that. And then moving along to the last two boards, we've got our ROM board and our widget board. So the widget board is the smaller one. Again, these both look to be relatively the same in terms of condition. This one's a little bit cleaner. This is the one from Rick. It's got a label saying that it was okay back in 2009, but who knows what could have happened since then. So I think we'll probably hold on to this one. None of these boards are a matching set in terms of serial numbers. There's a couple that have the same serial number, but it's not like we're going to have 5 boards with the same serial number, so I'm not too worried about that. So yeah, we'll probably use Rick's here. And then something interesting with the ROMs, we've got a couple different revisions here, and I believe there were 4 different versions of the Joust ROMs released over the years. Red, yellow, green, and white maybe. And I know there's differences between them. I know, for example, that there's a pterodactyl bug. Like, you're not supposed to be able to kill the pterodactyl. It's supposed to be like an invincible enemy designed to, get you to finish the level, not just sit there forever. But I believe, I could be wrong, I'll look this up, but I believe the red and yellow ones had the pterodactyl bug where you were able to kill the pterodactyl, which is sort of a point pressing opportunity to get artificially high scores. So this is an earlier ROM set with the yellow ROMs, and you see this label down here that says this board uses type A ROMs only. And if we look at the labels on the ROMs here, they all say 12A, 11A, 10A, that sort of thing. So these are all A ROMs, yellow ROM set, but it looks pretty good. And down here, and I'll pick up the whole thing with this metal plate. This ROM board that I got from Game Galaxy has the green ROMs on it, and it's actually the other way around, but this label says, this sticker says this board uses type B ROMs only, and sure enough, these are B ROMs. It looks like there's a couple that got sort of burnt, maybe they were replaced, that sort of thing. And this looks okay. I see one issue with the header, if you can see the which header is this? I forget which one this is. Looks like it's been sort of bent out of shape a little bit, and the board's a little bit bowing, so that could be a sign of some cold solder, but I think we'll be able to get that one working in relatively short order. But what's interesting is we're going to have options here in terms of which ROM revision we use, whether we're running the yellow ROMs or the blue ROMs. We've got these sort of, or the blue or green, these sets here. So I think my plan is to use the 4 boards that I got from Rick Shive for the ROM board, the widget board, the MPU, and the sound board, and then I'll use the power supply board and the transistor heatsink that I got from Steve23. These are the ones that I showed in the previous video, and those will be the boards that I run in this Joust. And then we've already got a nice head start on the boards that we'll need eventually for the Robotron coming maybe later this year, we'll see. I'm not in a rush to do that since, as you can see right here, I've already got a Robotron, so I'm not even sure exactly what I want to do with this other one, but it was such a great price that I couldn't pass it up. But yeah, and we've got some other boards here that are options in case we're having issues with one of these others, so that's good. And I've got 2 of the sort of inside cabinet metal plates. I've only got one of the larger one that goes on the inside of the back door, so I'll need to find one of those eventually for the Robotron. But I think we're in good shape here. So like I mentioned before, the next thing that I want to do, I've already, like I said, replaced some of the headers and one of the connectors on the power board. I want to go ahead and replace the rest of the headers, the rest of the original headers on the power board with those square Trifurcon headers, which should be great. I'll do that cap kit. I'll do part of the rebuild kit. I'll definitely replace BR1, and we'll put a little heat sink on top of that. We'll put new fuses in, maybe 1 or 2 more things, but we should be in good shape there for the power board. And then we'll look at the other boards here. For the soundboard, again, we'll replace all these headers. We'll replace this busted dip switch. I think the reset switch is fine. We'll replace the capacitors on this board. I think I might have fuses if these aren't good. And then hopefully that soundboard will be in good shape. But obviously we can run this game without having a working soundboard. moving to the MPU, the main things I'll do for now is maybe I'll take a look at cleaning up some of this crud around the battery holders. I'll definitely replace, again, all of the header pins. We'll keep an eye on what's going on if there's some issue with the RAM sockets, if any of that needs to be replaced. We'll see what's going on there. Oh, and of course, we'll keep an eye on this, dented crystal. I don't know what's up with that. One more thing, eventually we're going to figure out some sort of solution for the batteries. There's a couple of different options. You can, just put, regular AA, alkaline batteries in there and just, be very diligent about replacing them before they, leak and cause problems. You can put lithium batteries in there, and those tend to be a bit better. You can sort of remove this battery holder and mount it in a remote place and run wires over so that if it leaks, it doesn't affect the board. You can put NVRAM in, sort of a replacement for the way that, I think it's CMOS that holds the settings and high scores, and I've done that in my Robotron, but NVRAM chips are kind of hard to come by these days, and most places are out of stock. So another option you can do is get like a watch battery, like a cell battery, like shaped like a quarter, and mount that. And I actually have one of those kits, so I think that's probably something we're going to do. That doesn't have to be done right away because, the game doesn't need it to run, right? You'll get a warning every time that says all the settings have been erased because it doesn't have that power to keep that chip powered up when the game's turned off to store those settings. But I think that's what we're going to do here for now with the MPU. And then, the last couple of bits here, again, we'll replace the headers on the widget board. We'll do the same thing on the ROM board, and yeah, we'll test it all out. I have replacement ribbon cables in case these are bad, but they don't look too bad. And so I'm going to do most of that on my own off camera. You've seen me replace those headers already. You've seen me do cap kits. Maybe I'll show you replacing this bridge rectifier. Maybe I'll do that. But most of this you've seen before, so I don't want to make it repetitive. So I'll certainly point out anything weird that I notice if anything comes up. But yeah, I'll show that bridge rectifier being installed. And anything I think is interesting. But for the most part, we'll come back in just a moment your time, and hopefully we'll be ready to plug all this together and hook it up to power, hook it up to a monitor, and see if we can't get Joust running on a screen. So stay tuned for that. Okay, we're out here in the garage, and I've been working on this for the better part of a day, so let me get you caught up on everything I've done. So we've got the soundboard here. I did a cap kit. I replaced the dip switch that was broken. I redid all of the headers, and I think we're in good shape here. I checked the fuses. They are correct, and they are intact, so I think the soundboard is basically ready to be tested. The MPU over here, I also replaced the headers. This actually is the board that I think has the fewest headers of the board set, and because it uses ribbon cables to connect to the ROM board and the widget board. So I think we're in relatively good shape here. Eventually I am going to figure out a replacement for the battery situation, which powers I think it's the CMOS that stores the game settings and the high scores. Eventually want to put an NVRAM in there, but they're out. So I do have a cell battery solution there to fix that, although I think I may have mentioned that already. The interface board here just it's really supposed to be two separate connectors, but they're contiguous. I just have one long one in here, and that should be fine. So widget board is good to go. And the ROM board, I think we're in good shape. I did run into some struggles here. So this set of headers up at the top was fine, but the two here on the side, man, those were a bear to get off. So I think what happened was there's pads on both sides. There's pads on the solder side and solder pads on the component side. And obviously it's there's traces on top of the board too. And I think the solder when it was installed had pooled onto the top side, and it's hard to get the top side solder out when it's covered up by the header sort of housing there. And yeah, eventually what I had to do was kind of cut these apart, and this is what the old ones sort of look like now that I've destroyed them. Cut the pins out and sort of cut apart even the plastic housing for them. And in the process, I did unfortunately lift some pads, so had to do a little bit of repair, but you know, I ohmed it all out with my multimeter continuity test. And I think we're in good shape, but if I run into problems, that'll be something that I'll want to come back and take another look at. But so I think we're in good shape over here. Turning our attention over here to the, whoa, to the power board. I've been working a lot on this. So let's get you caught up here. And there's a couple things that I'd like to do together. So let's get into the tripod here. All right, so did a bunch of work on the power supply board. So I did replace all of the headers. So all of the headers are now good on the power supply board. And I did a cap kit, except for C14, which is the one that sticks up in the middle and will make things difficult if we go ahead and install that for now. And I've started the rebuild kit. I'm only going to do part of the rebuild kit, but I did replace all of the fuses. There's a few things with the rebuild kit that we're not going to do. We're not going to replace all of the bridge rectifiers. We're not going to replace the ICs, but it's good to have those parts on hand if we need them. But there's a few things that I do want to do and that I wanted to show you because they're a little bit different. The first is replacing bridge rectifier number 1 right here. So let's zoom back and maybe get a different perspective on this. So, oh, just drop it, right? So I think this bridge rectifier number 1 is kind of known for having issues, so it is one of the things that I will replace in the rebuild kit. All right. So we added some flux. Let's add some solder to the 4 legs here, and these are kind of beefy, so we'll need to use a bit of heat. All right, and now I'm going to switch the tip on my desoldering tool to use the heavier or the wider gauge nozzle, just because these legs on the bridge rectifier are pretty beefy, so we'll want the bigger one. I don't even know if the bigger one's going to work, or fit around them, but that'll give us a better chance. And yeah, this is such a huge pad that I'm having trouble even getting it melted. I'm coming to help it with the soldering iron itself. There we go. All right, let's see if we can get this sucker to come free. No. I wonder if I should just cut it. I kind of don't want to, but that might be the safest way to do this and get the minimal amount of damage. Let's see. Come in with these heavier. No, I can't even reach with that. Let's just cut her loose. You see how it's kind of floating in the air a little bit? You know, unlike most components, this bridge rectifier, you don't want to flush mount to the board. You want to have it sort of hanging 1/4 of an inch or so up in the air. Oh, 3 of the 4 did fall right out, the legs. So we do have a little bit of solder left here on top. Knock that out. Yeah, just like I showed in a previous video, I turned down the temperature that I'm using on all of my tools, and I guess I'm just, used to having a lot more heat. But, this is probably safer. Yeah, let me put some fresh solder over here. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Tiny bit of cleanup here. All right. So I think we've got these vias, these holes in the PCB nice and clean. And we're ready to install our new bridge rectifier. But before we do that, there's a couple things we're going to do to make it even better when it comes to heat dissipation. Because I guess the old one is notorious for getting hot and burning up and causing problems or whatever. So I've got actually a heat sink to mount onto the new bridge rectifier to help dissipate that heat. So let me grab one of them. And I bought two of everything because I've got another Williams game to work on later this year. So it's got its own heat sink, and it's got this small little nut and bolt to hold it on. And Peter recommends, I got this all from arcadepartsandrepair.com. Peter recommends a little bit of heatsink compound, thermal paste right here, that we'll put right on top of the bridge rectifier before we install the heatsink. Just looking at the instructions. Yeah, very light coat of thermal paste. Okay, I think that's a decent amount. All right. Let's grab a dirty Q-tip and sort of clean up the side there. All right. So, very light coat, and then we can take our heat sink and kind of slide it around a little bit just to spread that out a tad. Okay. And then, let me stand this up right here for a second. So we've got our nut and bolt with a couple of washers, and this is a nylon nut just to keep it from coming loose. And the best way I think to do it is sort of come from below, so there's no chance of the bolt sort of interfering with the mounting on the board. All right, I've got a socket kind of holding the nut in place, and I'll just come from the bottom with my screwdriver, which I got the bit back in, and we'll just kind of try to screw this into place. Maybe I can do it this way. Yeah, it doesn't need to be super tight, just snug. All right. I think that's probably good. Otherwise, if I do anything more, I'm just gonna damage it. So we'll call that secure. Okay. All right. So you see we've now got a little heat sink mounted on top of the bridge rectifier, bolted into place. A little bit of heat sink compound that, for the most part, is not all over my hands. And we're ready to mount this thing onto the board. And there is a certain way, there's only a certain way that it's going to fit. You see, like the spacing between the legs here is narrower than it is on that side. And we want to do this so the thing is kind of suspended above the board. Like I said, we want to have at least a 1/4 of an inch spacing to let heat pass through. So, it's been a while since I've done one of these, so let me find something to prop underneath both the board and this to hold it in place. All right, I think we're ready to solder this into place. I've got it suspended. I've got the bridge rectifier suspended about a 1/4 of an inch above the surface of the PCB, and I've got it mounted just sitting on a couple of boxes with spools of cheap wire. So I think we can come in here and We quickly tack a couple of these legs. Here we go. And really come in now and solder these in good. Lots of heat, lots of solder. We want really good connections. All right, let's take a look and see how we're doing. I'd say that's pretty good. So, yeah, we've got the right spacing. See that? Good, solid, maybe even 1/3 of an inch spacing between the bridge rectifier and the surface of the PCB. So let's test continuity with our multimeter. Make sure we've got good connections and aren't bridging anything. Where's that socket? Get that out of the way. Okay. Multimeter is on, continuity beep. This one doesn't go anywhere on top, neither does on the bottom, neither is that one. That one's good. That one's good. And the bridge rectifier is really kind of 4 diodes. Actually, I just don't like the look of that solder. There we go. So we'll get some connections between the legs themselves, like I said, because these sort of act as a diode. What a bridge rectifier essentially does is it turns DC into AC. We can check some of these connections on top. And you can even make a bridge rectifier with 4 diodes sort of in the right configuration. And a diode is like a one-way gate for power. It lets the voltage only go in one, or the current only go in one direction. That one's good. Does this one go anywhere on top? Yeah, it goes over here. That one's good. And this last one goes to that fuse. Okay, so I think BR1 is good, bridge rectifier number 1. We'll leave the other 2 in place. The other 2, let's see, bridge rectifier 2 is right here, BR2, and BR3 is back here. We'll leave those in place because those are less common to have issues. We do need to cut these legs down so that they don't make contact with the metal plate and short themselves to ground. All right. And you remember, when you're cutting legs or leads of components after you've soldered them in, you don't want to cut into the solder volcano. So it looks like there's a little spike on top of all of them, but not so long where it'll short to that metal plate. So what should we do next? Why don't we go ahead and install that final cap from the cap kit. So this would be C14, and I'm going back to the instructions from the Arcade Parts and Repair cap kit for the Williams D8784 power supply. And here's our final capacitor from that one, which is C14, should be a 4700 microfarad, 50 volt. And that's what we got right here, a nice beefy one. And with this, the leads are a little bit different. So originally the positive lead went to this via, and the negative one went to this one, but this is a slightly different spacing. So there is an alternative hole here. So we'll install it into these. And these are going to be a little snug going in. Come on, buddy. Come on, buddy. There we go. Okay. That's in pretty good. And we'll just solder these in place, double checking the polarity. Yeah, positive on that side, negative on that one. Solder these bad boys in place. All right. I'm really excited to plug all this together and test it. I feel like we're getting close with this joust. How's that look? Not too shabby. Not too shabby. Okay. Let's check continuity with our multimeter. Sorry for bumping the camera. That one's good. And that one's good. Okay. I think we're cooking. Let's cut these legs down. Oh, we can go a little bit more on that one. Okay. All right. Scratch that one off the list. Now that cap kit is completely done. So I think for, oh, and we'll mark this off. Okay. Let's see. I think this board is completely done. And the last bit of the power supply rebuild kit that I want to use for now is to replace the transistors on the big old heatsink. So put this over here just for a second and grab this heatsink. All right, and these are the two transistors we want to replace. Let me find the instructions for the rebuild kit. Cross off the things that we've done. We did the heatsink for bridge rectifier number 1. We did bridge rectifier number 1. We're not going to do the others. We have some diodes that we're not going to use. We have some ICs that we're not going to use. We've already done the headers. And we do want to use the micas and this heatsink compound again for the transistors, although this is a silicon mica. I'm not sure it's really necessary to use the heatsink compound, but that's what the instructions say, so that's what we do. All right, so here are our replacement transistors, a 2N3055 and a 2N6059. And they mount onto the heatsink here. And on the back, we have these sort of, I forget what these are called, transistor holders, right, on the back. And the instructions say that the 2N3055 uses the black, blue, and orange wire, which is this one at the bottom. So we'll put that one on the bottom. And the 2N6059 uses yellow, white, and green, which are up here. So, and I think these, if I recall, these are pretty easy to get in and out. They have these screws that hold them in, and I think these transistor holders just use a little bit of tension to hold the legs in place. But I could be remembering this wrong. Let's see. Is this going to want to come right out? I believe I'm right. There we go. Slides right out. Okay, no soldering required. I believe looking at this, this was probably changed at some point. It's got the silicon mica on it. I think I am going to skip using the heatsink compound. Like if you're just using a regular sort of ceramic mica, I don't know what that would be called, like a mylar mica, something like that. It's probably better to use the heatsink compound. But I think the silicon does a good job of transferring the heat, so I'm not going to interfere with it with that. But and so technically that is against the instructions. If I can get one of these mica out, there we go. So this is like a stretchy, like silicon sort of material, and it's these transistors are actually polarized, right? So there is a sort of north and south to them. You can see that the legs are sort of just off center, so you want to make sure that you install the mica the right way because it's off center too, and so is the actual holder. And again, this is 2N3055, which is going to go in looking like it's upside down, just because of how it's printed, and I'm trying not to get grease and dust on the mica. And yeah, so this is the 2N3055, which uses the black, blue, and orange wire, which is that one there. So I'm going to try to line this up and drop it. Yeah, good job. And come on. Put this back in. All right, I think I've got it in there to the point where I can drop in our machine screws to secure it in place. All right, how's that look? Pretty good, right? All right. And yeah, that looks real nice actually. And so we can come in and take the other old transistor out. And you want to be careful when you're buying transistors to get them from a reputable source. There's fakes out there, and I know when I buy from arcadepartsandrepair.com that I can trust that Peter has got authentic parts. Let's see, come on off. Because there's places that will buy the wrong transistor, scrape off the original marking, print on a new marking, and sell it as it was that part, which is yeah, a recipe for disaster. All right, second mica onto our second transistor. And its legs are bent ever so slightly. All right, there we go. This should go a little bit better this time. We'll get the holder in place. Okay. And our other screws. And with this, let's check continuity a couple different ways. One, let's make sure that we're not short at the ground. Ooh, you know, the painted metal, the paint is acting as an insulator. Because see, like, got to grab like a bare spot. I think we're good. think we're good there. And then, I guess I can't really test that. All right, so I think we're good to go there. So let me think, is there anything left to do before testing? Let me mount all these components up, and yes, there is. I need to add wiring for the optical joysticks. So let me get set up to do that. All right, so technically what I was talking about was I need to add some wiring to the reproduction wiring harness that I got from Golden Age Arcade Parts, so that it'll work with the optical joysticks. I'll explain that later, but you know, I'm actually going to skip that part for now because obviously the controls aren't necessary to, you know, just power the game on and see if it's running or not. I think maybe except to advance past certain screens, but I want to see something. I want to see if something's working. So I'm going to leave the control panel disconnected for now. So this is the harness that I got from, I think his name is Ken Falta from Golden Age Arcade Parts. And there's several different elements to the Joust wiring harness. So let's pull these all out and start connecting them. I've got the transformer assembly plugged back in sort of the same way as before, you know, with the Charles Klein's wiring going from the transformer to the power supply PCB. I've got the transistor heatsink plugged into the power supply PCB via the new Trifurcon header that we did in the previous episode. And let's see, this is the door harness part that we're not going to use just for now. And let's see, this is the main harness. We do want that. What's this? This is the AC harness. We're actually not going to use this part just because I don't have the interlock switches and the main power switch to plug it in. Let's see, this is the volume control. I got to figure out what I want to do with that. Maybe we're going to just not have sounds. And then this is the control panel harness. We're definitely not going to use that. So let's get the main wiring harness plugged in. And Ken makes these by hand. That's why, you know, in Ziploc bags. Lots of labels here. So let me sort of get my bearings and figure out where everything goes. All right. Things are going to be a little bit different because we're just not in a cabinet. Feel like I should be playing like Benny Hill music, you know, like I'm trying to figure this stuff out. Goodness gracious. All right. And like in my head, I'm trying to like remember how my Robotron comes together. Okay, now I think I've got it all figured out. I've got the harness plugged in, the main harness plugged in, and I think we're ready to go ahead with the test. So the MPU board is plugged in with these three header connections, the ribbon cable to the ROM board, the ribbon cable to the interface board. There are these two connectors for the interface board, the widget board, three for the ROM board. I've got three of the four, if you can see that, three of the four soundboard connections plugged in. I don't have the volume control knob plugged in, and in the harness itself, the speakers are not connected, so we won't have any sound. I've got all four of the connectors plugged in for the power board, and yeah, so what's not plugged in? So this is the control panel connection that's not plugged in. The speaker's not plugged in. The coin door is not plugged in. I'm not quite sure what those wires are for. They're not plugged in. I do have everything linked up for ground, so kind of got these alligator clip wires standing in for the grounding strap, so connecting both of the metal plates that the boards are mounted onto. Those go to the remnant of the grounding strap off the transformer assembly, and also I've tied in the chassis from the monitor to that. And of course, we've got the monitor power plugged in, and we've got the monitor signal, the video signal connection plugged in. So, I'm nervous. I'm not really expecting this to just work, right? I'm sure there's something wrong, but hopefully we get some signs of life and at least have an idea of what we're going to have to work on next. So let's get this set up on the tripod to see what's going on. I'm going to cross my fingers. I'm going to ask you to do the same. Hopefully we don't get anything catching on fire or magic smoke or who knows what. Just one last time looking at everything. I think we're good. Oh. And I swear, I have not tested this yet. We're doing this live together. I'm going to keep an eye on the ROM board for an error code if it pops up. But without further ado, let's see if we've got Joust. I hear HV. I see the 3 lights on the power board. I got a code flashing, 114. So we have, I believe that's a RAM error. Okay, look at that. All right. Let's turn off the house lights. We've got signs of life. High score table reset, bookkeeping totals cleared. Oh, and the screen's a little red, but I guess that's fine. We can adjust that. We've got signs of life. Wow, okay. I think in order to advance past that, I'm going to have to plug in some kind of controls. But look at that. We've got, is this a life screen? We've got logic running on the board. Like I said, it was RAM error 14. So we've got something. Let me think. You know what? I think it's it's after 2 o'clock in the morning. But this is huge progress, right? We don't have Joust running on the screen. Well, we do, right? This is the Joust font. We've got something from Joust coming up on this screen. I'm trying to think if I should wrap it up here. You know, I'm gonna record a wrap up just in case I do wrap up here. Let's see, what did we cover in this episode? Well, we worked on the board set, replaced all of the headers. We did a cap kit on the soundboard and a cap kit on the power board. What else did we do? We did a partial rebuild of the power board. Lots and lots and lots of work. And then we got our new reproduction wiring harness. Thank you again, Ken from Golden Age Arcade Parts. Plugged that together. Also, of course, using Charles Klein's wiring for the transformer. We plugged everything together. We crossed our fingers. Nothing exploded. Nothing caught fire. No magic smoke. We've got a RAM error. But that's something I think we can deal with. And we've got something running on the screen. So, yeah, I'm very happy. Coming up next, what are we going to do? Well, we will certainly take a look at that RAM error. We will wire up the rest of this wiring harness to the coin door at a minimum in order to advance past that screen. We'll try to hook up the speaker. We'll get the control panel hooked up. That's actually going to require a little bit of work. I got to run an extra wire to accommodate the optical joystick. It's a little bit different than the standard harness. And at that point, hopefully, as long as we can solve this RAM error issue, we should be able to play some Joust at that point. So yeah, you know what? I think I will wrap it up right here. I feel like I've done a ton. You know, did I make good on my goal at the beginning of this episode to have Joust running on the screen? I mean, the game's not running, but the board is running, and that's being produced by our board set. And that looks like the Joust font to me. So yeah, I think we'll call that an episode. So thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for all the comments, the likes, shares, everything. I really appreciate all of that. The support has been amazing. And it's probably 2:30 in the morning right now, and I'm a little bit delirious from working on this all day. So yeah, I'm going to sign off here. Thanks for watching Overtime Arcade. I'm Charlie, and I'll see you next time.
Overtime!